Hey guys, it's Rothy with Rothy Reads Numbers and the whole podcast. And this is a prelude chart reading, I guess, if you will, for episode 4, part 1 of the whole podcast featuring Robert Baer. Robert Baer is one of the world's most studied cases of near death experiences, of NDEs. He died twice in the same day, and he had two different types of experiences. The second one was able to be verified by nurses. It was literally one of those out of body experiences where he walked up to them and they were doing stuff with his belongings. I guess they were taking his belongings out of a locker or something, and they were having a conversation. And he walked up to them to talk to them. They wouldn't answer him, and he realized that he was dead. And later on, when they were able to, resuscitate him again and bring him back to life, he told the doctor that this experience had happened. He told the doctor what he had witnessed from coming out of his body and what they were doing to him, what they were saying while they were working on him, as well as all the way to that encounter with the nurses down the hallway. So it's quite a fascinating story. And that's the second part of it. The first part of it, which was, a big part of the whole episode, was the 45 minutes that he died the first time, and what he describes in that whole situation and that whole experience. He talks about going into the light, like we hear a lot about, and then there's some other experiences that he talks about that you don't hear in other near-death experiences. Certain feelings. The life review was huge for me. The life review where he had talked about so many things that experiences that he had, memories that he had with people in life that he didn't really even know, at the time, or he was a cop most of his career. So there were many encounters and situations where he did the right thing or he did the wrong thing, and those were brought to him in his life review. And what fascinated me the most was the seemingly unimportant things that he did for people. Like, for instance, not shooting this man one time when he had been justified as a cop to do it. He didn't do it. He gave the man a chance. He breaks down the situation, the story. But instead of shooting him, which he would have had the right to do, he didn't. And the man thanked him. There were so many other stories in his life review. And another thing, one of the main things that he talked about was be good to people, be good to others, because it's going to matter. It's going to matter. And then the other big thing that he talked about, which just, I get goosebumps even thinking about it right now, was his life review was on his left side, and on his right side was his beloved pet, his dog that he had lost many years earlier. And to me, like, we always wonder, I mean, I know that they're going to be there. I know animals have souls. I can feel them. I sense them. And I'm one of those people that animals always love and they just go to and trust naturally. And that's because I can sense them. So these sort of things are just incredibly fascinating to me. And so I was super grateful and honored to be able to have Mr. Baer on the show. I also know that this man has been on so many different shows. On the Biography Channel, the show I Survived, Beyond and Back. He's been on the History Channel multiple times, Nat Geo, Unsolved Mysteries with William Shatner, the Passion Harvest podcast, as well as many other podcasts, countless. And even so, he's very particular about who he talks to and who he will meet with and interview with. He did say that he will be coming back on again, and he did share that there is a piece of information that he has never talked to anybody about before that he will be sharing with us during his next visit to the whole podcast, which I am so humbled and honored and just blown away by. Like, why me? Why our podcast? But I am so grateful for that, and I'm looking forward to that. I feel like this is just like with everything else that has been a part of this process, putting the whole podcast together, that it is in alignment, right? And I think that his charts speak to that. One of the things that I talk about when I do charts with people, there's two things I generally mention. And those are that, A, out of your 5 numbers, everybody has 5 numbers in their charts, your life path and birth date number, those 2 numbers derived from the actual date of your birth, cannot change. Whereas your expression, your personality, and heart's desire number can change because those are derived from the actual spelling of the letters of your name, right? Your full name. So say women who get married, or even people who change their name for religious purposes, what have you, sometimes numerologists prescribe a name change. So for whatever reason, if somebody changes their name, their expression, personality, and heart's desire numbers generally change with that. However, your life path and birth date can't change. Who can change their birthday? Nobody, right? Or so I thought. The second thing that I always tell people is that even as an expert numerologist, being probably less than 0.05 percentage of the humans on the planet that can do what I do, even so, I still don't know everything that there is to know about numerology. It's like being the world's most brilliant mathematician and trying to count to infinity. You'll never get to the end of infinity. It's impossible, right? So that's the same thing with numerology. I can tell you the basics of it. I can teach the world how to use it. I can even delve into energy through numerology and empathically. That's how my gifts developed, actually. That was the catalyst. However, I will still never know everything that there is to know about numerology. But I love this because that means every single reading that I do, every single consult, I learn something new. I get a whole new base of knowledge and armory of tools to be able to go forward with and help other people with in the future, right? To talk about. And what I learned in Mr. Bear's interview and with his charts was that this is the only person in my experience thus far, and probably will ever be in my entire life, that has this with his charts. He is the one person that has a different life path and birth date number. I never thought that was possible. However, that's the case here. Because the man was born on 3/21/1948, and he died and was reborn, resurrected on 3/22/2009. So his birthday was 3/21. His rebirth date was 3/22. So this changes his life path and birth date completely, right? His birth chart went from a 1/3/8/11/6 to a 9/22/8/11/6. And if you have watched the previous episode 1 with K Fox and Jay Nixon, as well as the Jelly Roll and Bunny XO TikToks that I did, where Bunny actually liked all 3 videos and commented and said, yeah, spot on, the whole thing, right? Go back and watch those, because that is the algorithm and the frequency of this entire thing is the 922. The 922 is the Save Me. Jelly Roll's whole thing, Save Me. Go watch those videos. Go watch the K Fox and Jay Nixon episode 1. I'm getting goosebumps. Go watch their numbers and go listen to their story. I promise you're going to be blown away. Single people, those who've been through trauma, those who have been through tremendous loss, there is hope for amazing, epic love and life, okay? There is hope, and it is in the frequency of 922, and that's what I've learned so far doing the whole podcast. So if you want that epic love, if you want that epic life, if you want that epic joy, 922 is the Save Me frequency. Thank you, Jelly Roll, Bunny XO, K Fox, and Jay Nixon, and Mr. Bear for teaching me this. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We've got some incredibly exciting updates for you. Tune in soon for episode 5, coming soon. So excited. Love you guys. God bless. And we'll talk soon. Bye. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the whole podcast. I, of course, am your expert numerologist and accidental empath, hostess with the mostest, Rothy. And I am super, super excited to bring to you today our very special guest. His name is Robert Baer. He is one of the most studied cases of near death experiences out there. He has a tremendous story. This is not gonna, we're not gonna have enough time for his entire story here in one episode. So this will be broken down likely into two episodes. But without further ado, I'm gonna, because this is such a special broadcast and episode, I'm gonna go ahead and bring in our co-host and researcher, Shaggy D, to lead us off in a prayer, and then we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Robert Baer, okay? Go ahead, Shaggy.
Heavenly Father, we give thanks to you for this opportunity to come together to bring like minds and like spirits together. And Lord, thank you for sending the Holy Spirit on our behalf to guide us in our speech, in our actions, and to come to a better understanding, to further our understanding of the mysteries that you've laid before us. Lord, thank you for the opportunity to bring your servant Robert here to join us. And we thank you for the opportunity to enhance what we're experiencing currently. In your holy name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
All right. Without further ado, Robert Baer, thank you so much for joining us today. And please just go ahead and take us through your journey. We're so excited to hear about it.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a great honor to be here with your audience. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here. And I'm going to just start this out by saying that what I'm about to talk about is probably no different than somebody that was an explorer one day, like Columbus or Marco Polo or Mark Twain, where they went on ventures and came back, and there were no videos, no pictures, no cameras whatsoever. It was just their account on what happened. And you can just imagine Columbus talking to the Queen, or Marco Polo talking to his Queen, or Mark Twain when he would have his discussions in San Francisco, which would pack the house. What I'm about to tell you is very similar to that. And my story starts, and it actually started in 2008. I received a phone call from a friend of mine that we'd worked together as policemen, and I was a policeman for 23 years in California. And this man and I worked together for several years, and he would call me occasionally, or I would call him, and it was just like no time had changed. And that's when you know you have a good friend. And we were talking, and all of a sudden he stopped and he goes, Robert, I feel compelled to ask you something. And I said, what's that? And he goes, are you right with the Lord? And I said, well, I think so. And we kind of left it at that. And a short time later, I was in bed, asleep, and this was in 2008. And all of a sudden, at the foot of my bed was my mother. And my mother had passed away in 2005. And I thought it was a dream, but it wasn't. She was right in front of me. She looked young and beautiful, like when I was a little boy. And I don't know how she talked to me. I think it was probably telepathically, but she told me to get my affairs in order and that I was going to die. And she disappeared. And I broke out in a pool of sweat like you would not believe. And I was so upset at myself because I had my mother right there, and I should have been thinking quick enough to tell her how much I loved her and missed her. It was really difficult. But my father was still alive at the time, so I called him and talked to him about that. And of course, he wanted to know if she said anything about him. And I said, no, I just told you exactly what she said. And she disappeared. And he says, well, it must have been a dream. I said, that wasn't a dream. That was not a dream. And this man that called me, this policeman that we worked together, short time after that, he died. He had a stroke and died. And I went down to California, participated in his eulogy. And it was really a sad thing. I mean, last time I talked to him, our conversation basically ended with with him asking me if I was right with the Lord, and then he ends up passing away. So soon after that, I was in bed. Same thing happened. At the foot of my bed was my friend who had passed away. I looked at him, and he looked like he was young again, like when we were young. And he said, I'm going to bring you through the light. I want you to know that. And I said, what are you talking about? And this is the same thing. I don't know how we conversed. I think it was telepathically. And he says, I have to go now. I want to visit my grandchildren in Sacramento. So same thing happened. I mean, I couldn't sleep anymore. The situation with my mother and even with my friend, I couldn't sleep for a couple nights. It was that traumatic to me. Well, I'd had a physical, passed it with flying colors, so I kind of put the discussion I had with my mother when she showed up in the back of in my mind. I figured, well, I passed this with flying colors. So I did make a phone call though, and I did not know this, but my friend's grandchildren do live in Sacramento, in the Sacramento area, which I did not know at the time. So March of 2009, I went to visit my son in Arizona, and I'd been going out there a lot during that time of the year because we would go to spring training games, and I'd visit with my granddaughters and took them to the ball games and just had a great time. But it was extremely hot that week, hotter than normal whenever I visited. And I'm from a coastal climate, so when I'm in heat, I'm very uncomfortable. It takes a while to adjust to it. But I was there for 4 or 5 days. I forget what the amount was, but I didn't feel comfortable at all, and I just kind of felt nauseated and sick the whole time. The time came for me to catch my flight back to Oregon. So, and by the way, I live in Newport, Oregon, right on the coast. I forgot to mention that. But my son dropped me off at the airport in Phoenix, Arizona. We said our goodbyes, and I wasn't feeling good. So I go in the airport in the terminal, and there's this long TSA line. I thought, how am I going to do this? I don't feel good. Anyways, I John Wayne'd it, stood in line, got through there, and I stopped at a little convenience market in the airport plaza and bought, all they had was aspirins. They had no Tylenol, they had sold out. It was just aspirins. Probably a good thing that's all they had. I took a couple aspirins thinking, well, I'm going to try and nip this in the bud, but I just want to get home to Oregon. So I go to the area where you board the plane, and I wasn't feeling good. And finally, we decided to board. And I'm in the plane and I'm starting to put stuff in the overhead bin. And I dropped dead from a massive heart attack. And I don't have any idea about what happened to me from that point on while I'm on the plane, because I gravitated into a light, into a realm that was just magnificent. I did find out later that there were a couple of, excuse me, off-duty firemen from the Pacific Northwest that started to give me CPR and knew how to work a defibrillator. So they were working on me, thank goodness. But I was going on this journey up in the gravitating in this light, and I saw colors that don't exist on this earth. It was absolutely wonderful, brilliant. I felt in love. It was warm. And there was somebody with me. I didn't know who it was, but I know there was somebody with me. And I'd like to think it was my friend who told me he was going to bring me through the light. But I just started gravitating. And the next thing I remember is I was in front of a higher power. And it was so powerful, I could not even look. It was so humbling. The higher power was in charge, and no doubt about it. And I was in a setting where it wasn't like a auditorium, but it was in a way. There's all these souls. I knew they were souls just everywhere. And the higher power spoke to me. I don't know in what language. I think it was telepathically. And asked me a question similar to this: is what good had I done in my life? And the next thing I know, off to my left, I experienced a life review. And the life review was from the time of conception until the time that I died. And I went through every phase of my life, like being in a time machine. And the unusual thing about this is I could experience my emotions and feelings through the entire life review, but also those that I interacted with. And I'd been a policeman for 23 years. I've been a university professor where I used to grade people and all the things that have to do with academic work. I was a city manager. I was an international business consultant. I was a travel administrator and a general manager of a water company. I mean, I had power in everything that I did for work. And I had no idea what my interaction with people, what they experienced from being exposed to me until I saw what I did. And it was very humbling. I did not like what I saw. But it started when I was young. And one of the lessons that I learned, my family would go to San Jose, California, shopping every Saturday. We'd go downtown and my parents would get groceries and stuff, and we all load up in a station wagon. Everybody would be running all over. There's no seat belts. Everybody running all over. I saw that during the life review, and we got to a store, and I saw some baseball cards there. They cost a nickel for those, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old. I can't remember how old, but I asked my dad, and I knew how to work my parents. I knew my dad was pretty easygoing, but my mother, Irish Catholic, I mean, you didn't want to ask her for anything first because you weren't going to get it. I just realized that. So anyways, I asked my father, I said, "Can I get a pack of the baseball cards?" And my mom overheard me. So what Robert want? And And I pointed at the baseball cards and she goes, no. So my dad just kind of shrugged his shoulders. So anyways, I stole the cards. And we got home and I was in my room and I actually saw this. I opened the baseball cards and there was a little stick of hard gum in there. And I just popped it into my mouth and my mother opened my bedroom door and she says, what you got in your mouth? What is that? And the next thing I know, it just went sideways from that point on. I lied about it. And so she says, this is unacceptable in the house. We cannot have a thief. We cannot have this. So she forced my father to load us up in the car. We went back to the store and I had to apologize to the store manager. And my mom was saying, this is unacceptable in our family. You can call the police if you want. Arrest him. We don't care. He can't do this in life. And I was reading the mind of this poor store manager. He was like, this guy's 5 years old or whatever. He says, I don't want to do that. And he says, well, just give me a nickel for the cards. So my dad gave him a nickel. And we got back to the house and I mean, I was disciplined and grounded and all the above. And when I saw this, I mentioned this to my father, who was still alive later on. In fact, it was about a month later after my life review. And I was telling him about this and he goes, I remember that. He was laughing about it. And I said, you did your job as a parent. What you and mom did had a profound effect on my life. It programmed me. And I didn't realize, these are things I learned from my life review. Another thing, I was a pretty good baseball player, but I was nasty. I would throw at hitters. I mean, I could throw really hard. I scared a lot of people to death. I didn't realize it. But I was a freshman in high school and I made the varsity team, which was very rare. Usually they have like a JV team. I was right on the varsity team and I was starting. And I was taking a shower after practice. And there was the boys' locker room, a swimming pool area that separated that from the girls' locker room, kind of like a horseshoe type thing. And I was showering and the girls' swimming team was out there practicing. And one of the players on the baseball team, he was a bully. He grabbed me while I was in the shower and threw me out into the area of the swimming pool. And I had no clothes on and he locked the door. And all the girls were laughing and the coach came over and gave me a towel and it was a very embarrassing moment. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I now believe in karma. When I was seeing my life review, my last day of work in Santa Cruz, I was just driving. I was a watch commander. I got out. I was driving down the road. I decided at 2 o'clock in the morning, I thought I'm going to go out and see what's going on. There was a Thunderbird going down the coast highway, just weaving all over the place. Well, I stopped the car and the watch commander wasn't supposed to be involved in arrest in case you had a major incident happen or whatever. And you had to call a beat unit over to take the person to jail. Well, I had called for an adjacent beat unit, told them I thought I had a DUI, driving under the influence, walked up to this car, asked the guy for his driver's license and registration, and it was obvious he'd been drinking. And he gave me his driver's license, and I looked at it, and I thought, wow, that's kind of strange. Kind of like he was familiar. So I had him get out of his car and go to the front of his car to do some field sobriety tests when the officers got there. And all of a sudden, I realized it was that guy that had pulled me out of the shower when I was on the baseball team and threw me out in the swimming pool area, one of the most embarrassing moments of my life. Here he is, right in front of me, drunk. And I had power over him. Well, the adjacent units came. I just told them, I'm doing this one myself. And I never told them who I was. I never told the guy who I was. He kept looking at me and said, "You look a little familiar." But when he got in the car, he just started to cry like a baby and was afraid he's going to lose his wife and all. I mean, I just thought to myself, thank you, Jesus. This is karma. And it was. And it was the last arrest I ever made. Amazing. But getting back to my life review, as things were progressing, I had a situation where my sisters could not go out on a date unless I was with them. My parents had this double date rule. And my sisters had to sit in the front seat, and I had to sit in the back seat. And I would always ask this one girl to go with me. And it was one of my parents' rules, and the girls just hated it. And I didn't care for it either, because I usually had to go places I didn't want to go, but I did it. And I used to ask the same girl all the time, and she came up to me, and I was working on my car. And in that age group, back in those days, cars were big things. That's what teenage guys did. And we had a lot of lab, and we worked on our cars, and I just enjoyed it. And I had a lot of stuff. I had a 56 Chevy and 57 Ford. I had all these, I had an old Woody. I had almost a car lot in my parents' front yard, but I was always working on something. But she came over and she goes, "There's a dance at the Coconut Grove tonight. Can you take me? You want to go?" And I looked at her and I said, "I have plans for tonight." And she goes, "What's your plans?" And I said, "Well, my friends and I, we wanted to go cruising on Beach Street." And she goes, "Well, can I go with you?" And I said, "We don't want any girls with us." And she got all worked up. And I told her, I said, "We usually went and then we'd go drag racing." And I said, "I don't think it's good for you to be." She got all upset at me and stormed off. And then she came back with a letter. And she looked at me and she threw the letter at me. I picked it up, and then she stormed off. And that night, she was in a car with some other friends of mine. In fact, it was a 56 Chevy. And they hit a tree at about 70 miles an hour, and 3 of the 4 died. And she was one of them. And I mean, I had a guilty conscience for quite a while. But when I saw that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, "You never opened my letter." I knew exactly who that was. I still have that letter. It's in my storage. It was a reckoning for me. And I saw things that had to do with my police job. One night, for example, I was working down in Watts, South LA, South Central LA. And it was like a war zone in those days. It was right at the very end of the riots, the beginning of the riots, the late 60s, early 70s. And it was not uncommon to hear gunshots going off all over the place. And it was so bad they doubled us up. Instead of having one person unit, they had two person unit. That actually started those at that time period. And we were pulling somebody over for a DUI, and the apartments in that area, they would sometimes be 2 or 3 stories high, and there'd be like an alley in back. And this guy pulled in the back, and we got out. And as we were about ready to arrest him, it was not uncommon, and this happened this night. You would look up, and there'd be rifles pointing down at you. It was really intimidating. And then we heard some gunshots go off. And even the guy we were arresting said, "That's pretty close." That was his exact words. And I looked around, and we stuffed him in the car. And I saw this guy running at me with a gun, with a rifle in his hand. And for some reason or other, my instincts kicked in, and I did not draw down on him. I would have been probably justified in doing that. I yelled for him to halt, but he just kept coming. He got to us and said that he saw our car. He had just been robbed and fired some warning shots off. And when I saw that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, "Thank you for not shooting me." That had to be him. And I could talk about police things all day, stuff that I saw. But around this time, I noticed something fidgeting off to my right. And I looked over to the right, and my dog Scooter died in 2001. That was her. She was so happy to see me. She couldn't come to me, but she was there. And I thought at the time, I did not know that that animals ended up in a situation like this. But anyways, one more police story, and then I'll go into something else. I had a situation where we had a call of a car went over the bank and caught on fire, and somebody was trapped in it and burned to death. So I went out there as a watch commander or shift supervisor, whatever you want to call it, and took my camera out there because I figured it had to be recorded. And it was up in a remote area in the mountains, so the fire went out in the car, and they pulled the car up, and there was a guy laying on the seat with his arms crossed like this. And I was telling some of the other guys at the time, I said, "Have you ever seen anybody that's died, been burned to death that wasn't like in the fetal position?" And we were all kind of scratching our heads. And I said, "I wonder if this is actually a traffic accident." So I called the sheriff's office, and they came out, and they said, "No, that's a traffic accident." So I said, "Okay, we'll handle it." And the coroner came up and requested that do you have time to go talk to the relatives of this young man? And I said, I'll do it. So I went. Family didn't live too far away. I went, and there was like a dirt driveway that led to their place. And I was on the driveway, and I saw the lights come on. And when I got out of my police car, I heard a woman scream from inside. And I walked up to the door, and she opened the door, and she says, "You're here to talk to me about my son." And I said, "Is there anybody here with you?" And she goes, "No, just me." Just tell me what happened. And she was really distraught. And emotional. And I said, this is a really hard thing to have to tell a parent. But I said, I have to tell you the truth. I said, there's been a traffic accident and your son passed away in a traffic accident. She just fell apart. And she grabbed her, and I held her, and she just started crying. And I said, is there anybody that can help you right now? And she goes, no, and there's nobody. She says, I want to be with him. And I said, well, I said, I'll take you down. Get ready. I'll transport you down. But I said, you need to call somebody to meet you down there. And she did. I took her down there, and when I saw that part of my life review, I heard a voice say, thank you for being so nice and kind to my mother. That had to be that guy. And when I was a kid, we used to play a lot of sport games and stuff, but there was one kid, my next door neighbor, who was a hemophiliac. His blood didn't clot, and he couldn't play sports with us. But I would go over there all the time, and I would play Monopoly with him, or board games, Sorry or whatever. And his mom used to make a cherry Kool-Aid every time for me, and she put the right amount of sugar in there or something. I don't know, but she would give me a glass of Kool-Aid whenever I was there. And I was looking at that in my life review, and I could actually taste the Kool-Aid again. I could taste it. And I heard a voice say, you were my best friend. Again, I was telling my father about this later on. And my dad said, I forgot to tell you. He says, that had to be Paul. And I said, yeah, it had to be him. He says, Paul's dad came by in the early 90s. Did I ever tell you this? And I said, tell me what? And he said, he came by, and he says, it might have been in the late 80s. I can't remember. But he said, he came by and told us, your mom and I, that Paul had been in Los Angeles and had a problem with a bleeding problem, and they gave him a transfusion, and he caught AIDS from it.
Oh, wow.
And he died from it.
Oh.
And I said, that had to be Paul. And he said, that had to be. And my dad says, any memories about your mom and I? I said, oh, there's great ones. But I said, there's one that kind of baffled me. And I said, it was one where you and mom were standing by a car, and it looked like I could read the thing on the car. It said Chevrolet. It was an old car. He says, well, it was just your mother and I? And I said, yes. He goes, well, what did she have on? I said, she had this like plaid skirt on. And I said, I'd never seen her in that before. And I said, you guys were just laughing and smiling. And he goes, so wait a minute. So he went and rummaged through a box of photos, and he came back and he showed me this photo. He goes, is this what you saw? I said, that's it. And that's the car. That's what mom had on, and that's what you had on. I said, look at all the hair you had. We were just kind of laughing about that.
Yeah.
He goes, that was one of the best days of your mother's life.
Oh.
And I said, what do you mean? He goes, we went to the doctor's office, and he goes, she found out she was pregnant with you. And then we went right down and got married.
Wow.
I said, you got married after she was pregnant with me? And he goes, yeah. He says, your mother would kill me if she knew I was telling you this. And I said, you mean I was a love child? And he goes, yes, you were. And
That's so awesome.
that's
so sweet.
life begins at conception.
That's right. That's right. That's absolutely right.
And so anyways,
And excuse me, I'm sorry, Robert. We've got about 2 minutes and 30 seconds left on this. So I'm going to let you finish up really quickly, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this one up, and we'll have to finish with the part two, if that's okay with you.
That's fine. And I'd rather kind of continue just a little bit longer if we do a part two. And I hope your audience doesn't mind that there being a part two. But
They're excited to hear from you. I've already let them know about you, so we will definitely we'll finish that up.
the other thing I need to say is that there's two NDE experiences that I'm going to talk about. This one that I'm talking about, I was deceased for about 45 minutes and revived.
Wow.
The other one for about 10 minutes, all on the same day. Two different types of near-death experiences. So for your audience, if they hear somebody talk about having a life review, or somebody else talking about maybe hovering over the bed or watching, I mean, there are different types, and I experienced two on the same day. And I'll leave this for your audience, so if they want to tune in for part two, I'll explain that right from the get-go. But I know we have about a minute left, so I'm just I could go on and talk for a long time. I'd talk too much. So
I mean, you have a wealth of experience and knowledge to share with the world. Everything that you are talking about, specifically the things with spiritual awakenings and them coming through, these are things we need to talk to, especially the believers, about. So we will definitely see you in part two. Robert, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Okay.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time, Robert.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks. It's an honor to be here.
Thank
you, everybody. Tune in for part two.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to part two of episode 4 of the whole podcast. Thank you for joining us for episode 1. And where we left off, Robert was telling us about so many of his experiences within law enforcement and his life review within just one of his 2 near-death experiences that he experienced. And I believe they were both within the same day, and they were 2 different types of near-death experiences. So we've got a lot more to go into with Robert and his amazing experience. It's one of the most studied NDE experiences out there, from what I understand. And I know that Shaggy has done some more research on just the crazy amount of media that has been done on this story for Robert. And so tell us a little bit more about what you know, Shaggy, and then we'll get right back into Robert's experience.
Yes, because this is certainly a juicy story. So among other media credits and the litany he has, Robert is the co-founder of Spiritual Awakenings International, which now has reach in over 92 countries, if I'm not mistaken. He's also been featured on the Passion Harvest podcast, on the Jeff Mara podcast, and on the Other Side NDE podcast, as well as some TV appearances on the Biography Channels, I Survived from Beyond and Back, and National Geographic's Visiting the Beyond. So without further ado, let's take it away with our guest host, or with our special guest, Mr. Robert Baer.
Thank you for having me back. I appreciate the opportunity to speak again to your audience.
Thank you.
It's a real honor to do so. And Sarah touched on something that triggered the way I would like to start this part 2, and that's having more than one type of near-death experience. Before I had my first one, I had no idea what they were about. I'd have to say I probably would have never believed that these things existed, and you know, there was a time not too long ago that maybe if someone talked about their near-death experience or what happened to them, they might have been burnt at the stake. You never know. That's a reality, and so part 1, I talked about my life review. And I pretty much covered everything in that. I mean, I could go on in more detail, but I was revived. I was taken to a hospital and was revived by a doctor that the guy just wouldn't let me die. I'd been deceased for a long time, and
Wow.
he was from Pakistan. And when I was revived the first time, I was in a operating or the emergency room area where on a gurney or bed,
Right.
and everybody was working on me, and the doctor had told me, he said, "You're back." And I heard him, and he said you had a heart attack. And I actually remember him saying that to me. I don't know what else was said, but I immediately went and flatlined right after that. And I remember seeing the screen with a flatline on it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
I was actually hovering over the bed, watching everybody frantically working on me.
Wow.
And when they were doing so, there's another part in the hospital where there were a couple people in the administration part, where you check people in and before they have their appointments or whatever. They were going through my personal things that had come in on the ambulance with me. And
And
I
you
was
saw
watching
this.
it. I was watching them do it. And
Wow.
I carry two wallets. A lot of policemen or retired policemen carry two wallets. One has your regular stuff like your driver's license, your social security card and whatnot. The other one has your police ID with your retirement badge and all the other stuff, or your badge if you're still working. And both of my wallets were in my computer bag that came in. So they were going through everything, and they were looking for my insurance cards. I saw them do this, and I was trying to tell them where my insurance cards were because I put them underneath my police ID in my second wallet. And as I was trying to talk to them, I realized they couldn't hear me. And I thought,
Wow.
I must be dead.
Mm.
I was watching them go. I saw the whole thing, and the next thing you know, I'm back to life. They revived me again. And
This same
I,
doctor revived you
same,
twice.
same guy,
Wow.
same doctor. Thank you for clarifying that.
Wow.
And so I ended up in the hospital in the heart, uh, what,
Cardiology.
yeah, in the ward. It was like intensive care, I guess.
I see you.
Had all these machines hooked up to me and stuff. And I mean, it was
Yeah.
ugly. And they would come in and check on me all the time. And uh, I honestly didn't know. And it may have got to the point where I didn't care um, what was going to happen. I really wanted to stay alive and see my children one more time.
Okay.
That was my goal. I was
Wow.
laying in bed thinking that. And it came time where the doctor was doing like a kind of checking me, and he goes, "You happen to remember anything when you were deceased?" I said, "Yes, I do." And he started to talk to me about uh, or ask me about what I remembered, and I told him some of the same things that I told you at my first part. And he was listening to everything I said. And then I told him the second part about watching him and the others work on me when I passed away in the emergency room again. and how I hovered over the bed and saw everybody going through, not everybody, saw the people going through my stuff and my personal belongings. And he goes, really? He says, can you describe those people? And I said, yeah, and I did. He says, I'll be back. He went to admissions. They were working another shift, but a few days later, brought them back to my room where I was. And he goes, are these the people? And I said, yes. And they were looking at one another, and he says, you tell them what you told me. So I told him about the conversation I'd overheard. And they said, that's exactly what was said, word for word.
Wow.
So why I'm saying this is that if somebody, like I said, somebody tells you they've had a near-death experience and they've had a life review, they've gone into a light, or you have somebody that says they were hovering over their bodies, or I mean, there's different types of near-death experiences,
Right.
and I experienced two on the same day.
That's incredible.
So
I have a question, if that's okay.
yeah, sure.
You just mentioned, you said that you wanted to get back to your kids and see them one more time. There's a lot of experiences, the NDE experiences that I have heard or watched, where the people say when they go to the light and they experience such love and they do their life reviews and they're going through this whole process, and then they're sent back, that they feel sad about being sent back, and that they're no longer afraid of death after their NDE because they know it's going to be amazing afterwards. So are you saying that your experience was a little bit different, that you didn't have that feeling of like of overwhelming love and comfort and like you were supposed to be there, or what, how did that feel for you?
Well, having gone through what I went through, um, I wanted to live. I can tell you that. Um, and I'm grateful. I I know you're into numbers, numerology. I was born on March 21st, 1948. I died on March 22nd,
2009.
2009. And here I am. I've had 5,404 extra days of life.
Oh, praise the Lord.
It is a real blessing.
Yeah.
I have not expected this. I know when I talked to the doctor initially, he told me that I would, he says, I hope you get to see the new year, which
Wow.
would have been 2010.
Wow.
And really good to me. He was really a good man. And even called me to check up on me when got back into Oregon. And by the way, I I wanted to get out of the hospital so bad. I just wanted to get to Oregon.
Yeah.
And so after a few days in the intensive care cardiac room, or whatever they want to call it, I told the doctor, I said, I would like to get back home. And he goes, I don't think you should. And I said, my daughter had came from out of state. My son was from that area, so I got to see both my kids, and I was really grateful for that. And but I said, I really need to go home. I just want to go home. And finally, he came in and he says, well, I'll let you go home with the condition that as soon as you get there, you need another surgery. And I said, are you kidding me? He goes, no. He says, I know someone there that I think would do good. And I said, well, he says, if I put you on the plane, give you a clearance to go on that plane, you got to promise me you'll do it. And I said, I'll do it. So I got to fly home, and I immediately went to a hospital in Oregon, and I had that surgery that I promised that I'd have, and you know, I was in the surgery recovering room, and it was raining. In Oregon, it rains like crazy, but it was raining. This was, March, April. It's always raining here in Oregon. But the wind was blowing, and I had the surgery, and I was in the surgery recovery room, and I heard this rain hitting against the window, and I thought, oh, it sounds really ugly out there. And I happened to turn over, and there was this old nun there. And I looked at her and I said, am I dead? And she goes, you're not dead. And I said, well, I said, what are you doing here? And she goes, I'm praying for you. And I said, well, thank you very much for that. And she goes, oh no. She said, I'm just glad to be here. And she goes, I have a favor to ask you. And I said, what's that? And she goes, I understand you were deceased for a while. And I said, well, who told you that? She goes, well, it's all over the hospital. You're like Lazarus. And I said, well, I don't know about that. She goes, oh yeah, that's everybody's talking about that. And she goes, I spent my whole life being a nun or sister, and I just need to know what you experience. Can you take the time to tell me this? And I said, well, not now. I was recovering from my surgery. She says, I'll come back. So, by the way, when my book comes out, that's what's going to start the book. My conversation with the nun, because when she came back, I told her everything. She's one of two persons I've told everything to. And it was an emotional time.
I bet.
It was, but that's exactly how to start this experience, because here's a lady that spent her whole life.
Apropos. So
And she had a chance, and boy, she jumped on it. And so that happened, and recovery was, it took a long time, and a couple of unusual things have happened since. My vision used to be 20/90. I always needed glasses to read with, and I still do, but my vision changed to 20/10, and they can't figure out what happened. I just had a test done a couple weeks ago. Again, they send me in all the time to check that. It's a phenomena that some people that have had near-death experiences, they have stuff like that. Things happen like that.
That's incredible. I've never heard about that, the physiological effects that happen.
And the other thing is, I still can see those colors I told you about. There's times where if it's real quiet, and especially at night, I can feel it coming on. So I get myself something to drink, and I sit and I can see the colors. It's magnificent.
Okay.
And it just doesn't happen often, but it happened a lot at first. But as time has marched on, or whatever you want to categorize it, I've noticed that phenomena, and I have developed like medium tendencies, and I never believed in that before, but I'm just.
That's incredible. That's you're mentioning stuff that is so much in my spiritual awakening, and I didn't have an NDE, But it's
Yeah.
literally like I see that sometimes those colors in that film over everything. It's like a translucent film of colors I've never seen. And then the my skills and abilities just started growing in 2019. So it's
Oh,
like,
Ruthie, if I may interject something, and that the enhanced vision, one of the credits I forgot to mention Robert on was he was featured in the book Life After Near Death by Deborah Diamond. And that segment goes more into detail about his enhanced vision. So for our audience, if they want to pick up a copy of that book and want to learn more about it in depth and detail, that would be an excellent read and opportunity.
we'll make sure to put that in the credits and the information for our posts as well. Thank you. Good note on that.
But some of the other things is like, if I go through TSA, it's not unusual for me to set off everything, even though I'm not carrying a gun or any.
Right. It's
And
almost like you became electromagnetic or something.
and sometimes I set microwaves off, and I have a real problem at one of the stores. In fact, they're used to me leaving the store. Because it sets off there's an alarm as you leave if you have like a item that has
Yeah.
some sort of a sensing device or a sensory device, like if you steal it, and I
Right.
set those things off sometimes, and
That's crazy.
it was a lot more right after it happened than it is now. And the other thing that, for example, recently I was driving on the coast highway here. Something told me to pull over, so I listened. I pulled over, and the next thing I know, there's a logging truck fully loaded on the wrong side of the road on a curve. If I hadn't pulled over, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now.
So those natural voices. Yeah, we have to
The
listen.
prompting.
You have to listen.
Yes.
And
So let me ask you this. What do you say? This is where I have an issue, Robert. This is where I'm having an issue because I grew up in the church as a Christian. I still believe in Jesus. I love Jesus. He's my savior. But I also know that religion is the control side of it. And it's there's a lot of fluff and puff that they don't want us to believe because these are the truths that connect us to those energies, whatever you want to call it, if it's source, if it's God, if it's our angels, Holy Spirit, whatever somebody wants to call it, that's coming to you without your prompting, just like they come to me, just like I know things sometimes and I don't ask for it. And I get called a witch for it. I understand numerology at a level that hardly anybody on the planet does. And I get called a witch for it, but that's not my faith. So how can you speak to, there's specifically somebody I'm going to send this to, but specifically when those people came to you before before your NDE, and since if they have, and these senses that have come about since your experience, speak to that and what religion says about it and how we should really be looking at this stuff, if you would, please.
well, I'll give it a shot. I was not a regular churchgoer before. However, I did go mostly when I was married. The person I was married to, I did that out of respect for our relationship. I'd go to church, and I don't regret that. I made some great friends that way, and I believe in especially Jesus Christ. I know, and I've talked to people that have experienced that. The people that I've interacted. One thing about being in the circle that I am right now, and he mentioned a couple of podcasts. I've been on probably 75 podcasts. It wasn't just those few, and other shows, and talk to groups, even talk to like atheist groups. I'll talk to anybody. I feel that's why I came back to life.
Absolutely.
And Spiritual Awakenings International is something I'm very proud of. I started that with a doctor who also was an experiencer, and like I said, I think we did a great thing for the world and for your audience. It's free. If you go to www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org, you can join, become a subscriber. We have all types of talks, all types of programs, but we bring people out that talk about these things. And I had no idea that I would be doing this. This is what happened as a result of coming back to life and dying and coming back to life. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not a curse. It's something you learn to live with, but it is difficult, like at times, to deal with people that are not open-minded about accepting experiences. And when I talk to groups or I talk to organizations, I do have a lot of positive feedback, but there's negative feedback, and you just have to realize that's the way it is.
Right.
And here I go back to Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus. People probably thought they were crazy too. But still, they reported on what they saw. I wish I had cameras. I wish I had a video. The one thing about it, I've had some experiences lately where there have been other witnesses, which makes it very easy because it's not just your credibility, especially when you have other witnesses
Yes.
who
Yes.
validate what
That's
you've seen
huge.
or what you've experienced. And
Mhm.
and I'll be glad to come back and talk about a couple of those. I can't do it in a short time period. If your audience really desires to hear about, I've got a great Jesus experience that that actually didn't happen to me, but it involved me, and I would love to share sometime. I've been very guarded about what audience to present it to.
Yeah.
And then there's there's other things, but to go back to your question, Sarah, you're not crazy. And the people that don't want to listen to you, they have that right. But but judging somebody is not right either. If it's something that they're going to listen to and then they're just going to slam them. But that's just my perception and my feeling. And anyways,
Well, I have thank you
I
so
talk
much
too
for
much.
that. No, I mean, I love it. It's all a blessing, Robert. And there's so much to share about your experience, and I understand that. One thing that I want to tell you about is just very quickly. My father passed in 2021, and he showed himself in a major way. And it had to do with a Cowboys game that we went to in 2019. And this whole thing, a couple of videos that had to do with the Mystery Machine from Scooby Doo. It's a big part of why my co-host is named Shaggy D. And it's a big part of why we're in the whole podcast and why we're on this adventure together. And I do believe that he's with me all the time. I've gotten, there's religion, and a lot of Christians will be like, well, those are familiar spirits and the Bible speaks against that. But my experience was this: my father, after I asked him the day of his funeral to show him or to send me signs, is what I asked him. You got to send me signs, Dad. I can't do this alone. I told you I wouldn't be able to do this and handle it when the time came. I need you to show me signs that you're with me and you're okay. And what he did was, the next morning, less than 24 hours later, I'm standing outside of my cousin's house where she's lived our entire lives, and it's down the street from where I grew up. So suffice to say, we know this neighborhood well. I'm standing there looking at my phone. An anniversary reminder comes up with my dad. As I'm looking at it, I see in my periphery this car pull up, this van pull up, and right in front of me, the mystery machine pulls up and parks right in front of me and parks for the day. Nobody had ever seen this van there. I took video of it and everything. Nobody had ever seen it before because of because of the story that it had been related to. My entire family knew immediately. I screamed for my cousin. She came out. She was like, "Oh my God!" Like everybody knew immediately that that was my dad, sending a sign that he's there, he sees me, and he's with me. And it was in that moment. I always do my best not to cry at this point of the story, so bear with me. It was at that moment that I knew instantaneously two things. We are all energy, and he just transferred form. And science proves that we can't be created nor destroyed. His form of energy it transferred into something else. And the second thing that hit me was that he's always been this, and it's what he was always supposed to be, and it's what he went back to. And that's the best way that I can describe that knowing and that feeling that I had the moment that I saw the mystery machine pull up right in front of me out of nowhere. Nobody had seen it ever, the day after his funeral. And it was in reference to a game that we had attended on 11/10/2019, November 10th. So every time I see the 111 markers, if it's 10/11 or 11/10, 11/01, 111, he shows me those at least 3 to 6 times a day. And I know it's him saying hello. And to me, that is not a demon. That is not a demon coming in and trying to take my soul or trying to, that's not like Christianity and religion all these people try to tell me, well, that's a familiar spirit and you're dealing with demons, Sarah. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. And I feel like what you shared with us about the people who visited you prior to your NDE, we're just energy, and we change form, and we can still communicate, we can still tap in. We are part of God, and he's a part of us, and we return to him when we go in a way, but we can also be here too. I can't explain it all, but that's what makes sense to me. Does that make sense to you? And we've got about 8 minutes left.
Yes, it does. And I'm glad you brought up seeing my mother and my friend that passed away, my old police friend, because I'll tell you, it was so traumatic, but it was real. I was very careful about who I talked to that about. I told my father, and actually it made my father and I closer. We started to talk about things that for some reason they were never said, or information that I didn't know. And I am really grateful that my mother felt it upon herself to warn me. I did die. She wasn't lying, but I was revived. And my friend, I mentioned going into the light into that room, and that was just a wonderful feeling. It was just all warm, and it was just like, and there's no time.
Yeah.
And you can't say you were in there for 10 minutes. People always want to say, well, how long were you in there? Were you in there for 2 or 3 minutes or 10 minutes? Or time has no,
doesn't exist.
Time's a man-made measure.
it's something that doesn't matter in that realm. And I believe in the psychic ability of some people. I'm sure there's some that aren't. They just use it as a means to maybe even for a monetary means, for all I know. I don't know, but um, I've I've seen some pretty incredible things that I never would have believed before I died and came back to life. And the other thing that is paramount to me is how you treat other people. My life review was a reckoning. I was not, um, I'm not the same person that I used to be. I'm not, and I know it. Um, it's getting upset over things. Um, it really doesn't do any good. And I know I never want to be the boss again. I don't like to evaluate people or I even stopped being a professor because you start grading people and especially for doing like work uh, like a master's degree type work where you send it back to them and I mean I don't need that anymore. But I do need my family. I enjoy them. I do need interaction with other people. And whether they want to believe me or not, that's their choice. If they want to, and I'm going to say this to you, Sarah, if they want to think you're crazy, let them think you're crazy. You're not. You're not considered crazy by some people. And I know a lot of people like us. And I didn't know them 3 or 4 years ago, but I sure know them now. And they're all over the world. And they speak all different languages. And they come from all different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And one thing about when you go in the light and come back, you're usually a changed person. And
Beautiful.
it's a very humbling experience. I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but it happened to me, and you have to live with what happens. And
Quite a special purpose, Robert. It's quite an incredibly highly called purpose.
I just consider myself an average white man, but
Not by
but
far.
it's it's been quite a ride, and 5,404 days. By the way, Michael Jackson, the rock star, uh, passed away about the same time I did,
Mm.
and he had a doctor who looked at him who was renowned for raising the dead. He had been deceased about 45 minutes, the same amount of time I had been.
Mm.
And they tried to revive him. They couldn't revive him. I had this doctor from Pakistan that wouldn't let me die. And what would Michael Jackson have given for 5,404 extra days of life? Maybe he didn't want to live. I don't think that. I think he wanted to live.
Yeah.
And uh, there was a purpose. I
For
honestly don't know what it was.
Yeah.
I don't really.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other thing that amazed me was seeing my dog.
That's incredible. That's
Treat your pets.
encouraging. Yeah.
I mean, animals are special,
Yeah, they are.
and
Thank you for saying that.
I know that's a lot of people have remarked about my comments on that on talk shows. I know I heard Mark Levin did. It was a talk show host, and a guy named Michael Savage did. It was after that TV show I Survived Beyond the Back came on.
Yeah. Familiar with both of them.
Yeah, I just heard that they did. So, if you're a dog lover or a cat lover,
We're gonna see
like
them.
yeah, that's right.
We're gonna see them, and
Even
I
to
believe they're
right
gonna
too.
meet us there. Yep, for sure. Well,
But
Robert,
anyway,
I want to thank you so very much for just spending your time with us. I know that you're very picky about who you share your story with, and I cannot express in enough gratitude. Thank you for spending your time with us, and you are invited to come back. I hope you come back and share more with us. I'm going to actually make a special video just for you after this with your chart, talking about that and kind of my review of all of this. And I hope it's a blessing to you, because you've just been a tremendous blessing to me today personally. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thanks again to your audience. If you need to get a hold of me, www.spiritualawakeningsinternational.org. There's a little link in there where you can send a message. And please subscribe and check out the videos on there. It's not just to me, of other people. I think you'd really enjoy it.
I'm going to, for sure.
And
Thank you, audience.